the big bait kit. It's a 4.75-inch paddle tail. Now, the other bait that New England has is alewives, and they have them in Sebago and they have them on Champlain. There's one lake in New Hampshire that has them. That fish gets a lot bigger, and it gets up to 6 or 7 or 8 inches. So this is a big swim bait, and we're matching that with a lead-free, glow-in-the-dark, either white or chartreuse. So that'll pair onto there. And this bait is symmetrical, or the same size all the way back here. So if you're getting light strikes or short strikes, you can just cut that bait and make it short. 6-inch glow-in-the-dark grub tail. So that thing will flutter as it's getting ripped away from the fish, and that glows like crazy. This one is just glow, so you want that glow to be as bright as possible. When I realized with live scope, if you drop that down there and it's glowing bright, like I'll use a UV light to glow it, or I'll just use the sun, I've seen fish come from 30 feet away in 100 feet of water and just slam it. You can't even reel away from them fast enough.
All right, shall we?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, welcome to the Hunt Fish New England podcast. We're not going to say what number episode this is due to some type of superstition, but we are very excited for this episode. We met our guest tonight at the New Hampshire Outdoor Expo, and I'll tell a quick story about that. If you did not listen to our previous episode from the expo, it's episode number 10, live from the New Hampshire Outdoor Expo. So it was day 2, it was Saturday. I was at our booth solo, and I'm talking to Josh here, and we'll talk about who Josh is and Josh's company in a second. But I'm chopping it up with Josh. I'm trying to sell him on listening to our podcast, and his kid's there, and it was really cool. And then while we're talking, people are coming up and they're like, "Hey, are you Josh from Bendit? Like, hey, are you Bendit? Can I take a picture with you?" And I'm pretty sure you gave an autograph at some point too.
Probably.
And then out of nowhere, like my kid showed up randomly, and it was this huge thing. But it's when I realized we had a local celebrity on our hands in Josh Treadwell from Bendit Fishing. So I thought that was a fun way to meet you initially. And thanks for coming on our podcast that we did at the expo. So Josh, thanks for coming on tonight again. Hopefully we can get into more detail about Bendit Fishing. But why don't you tell us who you are and what Bendit Fishing is?
Yeah, so I'm the producer, content creator, editor, the do-it-all guy for Bendit Fishing. I've been doing it since like the spring of 2017. Like April was, I think, when I first started. And I really got into it because I started doing bass tournaments when I moved to Vermont. I fished my whole life, but I really got into it when I moved from Connecticut doing for my master's degree and stuff like that. And I moved to Vermont to get a new job and moved there with my fiance and then wife at the time. And I started fishing a lot, started getting into bass tournaments with my cousin John, who has a little small bass series that he does up in northern Vermont on Lake Champlain for the most part. Started doing that and got really, really into it, bought a bass boat, and then bought a new sonar, and there was a $2,000 Humminbird Helix sonar, and there was no reviews on it. So it was like a very, very new product. I'm like, you know what? Let me do a review on this on YouTube. I knew nothing about YouTube. I knew nothing about editing. I knew nothing about how GoPros worked. I knew nothing about that you could even make money on YouTube, because I always thought YouTube is just like a time suck. Like I used to go on YouTube and I'm like, I'll spend an hour there. I'm like, I've done nothing. So I personally didn't spend a lot of time on YouTube, and I'm not a very good consumer of content. But that kind of started the channel, and I've been doing it ever since. And I've changed from bass fishing to touring around the United States for about 6 months. My wife went on a road trip, sold her house, and did a bunch of other stuff. And then I moved back to New Hampshire area, and now I've been just doing fly fishing, lake trout, striped bass, everything that I can possibly get my hands on. So that's where I am today, if you want to call it that.
So would you say you're a full-time content creator for the New England fishing scene?
Yes, and one of the only ones in New Hampshire, as far as I know, that's full-time. There's a lot of part-time people that release, a couple of videos here and there, or they're just very seasonal where they just do ice fishing and stuff. A lot of guys up in Maine. So been doing it full time for this October, it'll be 2 years, and it is not as easy as it looks. And I know we kind of alluded to some business questions ahead of time, and there's a lot of things that I wish I uh, it's hard to take a hobby that is funded by a 9 to 5 job. And I was getting paid fairly well with my 9 to 5 job, and that was funding my house that I'm sitting in and other stuff and all of the things that I wanted to buy for that hobby. And the money that was coming from YouTube was just a bonus, basically. Didn't matter. It was just nice to have kind of thing, nice conversation started, because it's not a lot at my size of a channel. And turning that small amount of money to like, okay, tomorrow you need to actually start paying all these bills that you got: gas, fuel for the boat, and insurance and business insurance. And recently I just actually formed an LLC and got an EIN number, or EIN, which I knew nothing about, didn't even know how to do. So I just did all that fun stuff as business wise. But that's kind of the stuff that's been doing in the last few months here, making it more and more real every time I change years and look at my taxes and stuff.
So it's something you bootstrapped at first and you've turned it into something full-time.
Yes.
Before we get into like the business structure and maybe some tips and tricks of the trade, tell us about some of the content you're releasing from Bend It and why it's unique to New England. Maybe start with like winter stuff you do that's unique to what you're doing, and then talk about some of your trips through the spring and things in the summer and fall.
Yes. So winter is my busy season, if you want to call it that. That's where a lot of my views come from. That's where a lot of my my money revenue comes from. And my belief in that is people are sitting at home because it's dark at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's nothing to do besides either watch YouTube or go ice fishing in the dark, which you can do. But most people do it on the weekend. So a lot of my ice fishing content is slightly different. I fish a little bit different. And I mentioned this before we actually hit the record button. It's like, I'm super fidgety and I need to like go. And I've always been that way. And I'm not one of those people that just set up your 2 tip ups and then drink a bunch of beer and chat with a bunch of friends and like sit back and relax and wait for the tip ups to go off. I've never done that. Just never do that. That's not my style. The way I learned to ice fish is from my cousin John, who's very similar to me. Just got to go. So I actually never set set lines, if you want to call it that, unless they're cusk lines or something like that. But for the most part, I'm jigging. So I'm bouncing around looking for fish. I have some technology that helps me with that. I use live scope or live imaging. So I'm looking out underneath the ice, anywhere between 5 feet away to 120 feet away. So I'll run out with my snow dog, which is basically a snowmobile with the wheels cut off, or like not the wheels, but the skis cut off, and you're actually kind of dragged behind it, kind of like a rototiller, if you want to, or like a snowblower basically with tracks on it. So they're one of my sponsors. They were a great help last year, and I've had this is my second snow dog, so I've been using them for the last 3 years. So I buzz around, drill a hole, pan around, try to find fish, run over to where that fish was, drop down, and hopefully catch that fish. So that's something that a lot of people don't do unless you're on a machine, and even on foot, it's widely successful. Instead of setting set lines that only have like a 30, let's say maybe in clear water like Winnipesaukee, you have like a 60-foot diameter that fish can see that or hear that in that area. The fish has to swim in that 60-foot that circle. Like you have to be in a good spot at the right time and have the right bait and all of that stuff. And I try to take all of those variables out. And that kind of comes along with how and why I fish. So my master's degree, and actually all 3 of my degrees, is in like critical thinking and like manufacturing style, or lean manufacturing as it's called. And so I still do that consulting stuff on the side, but that's how I think of when I ice fish. Like how many, not like, oh, this the pressure today, or it's this, or the weather. Like I account for all of that. I try to eliminate as many variables as possible because I'm trying to go out there and get a video without wasting a ton of time, or time, fuel, and nobody likes to be out there when it's negative 22. So
Sure.
Yeah, I try to go out and get content as much as possible. So my content differs a little bit. I try to go more on the techie side of things, and use electronics. And I really just go for most of the cold water species. So I don't go for bass or anything like that. I do go crappie for a little bit, usually early or late in the season, but most of it's lake trout or burbot, or cusk, as we call them here in New Hampshire or parts of New England.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's how my stuff differs quite a bit, and it's the run and gun style compared to the sit and wait.
Sure. The live scope, I think, is extremely entertaining to watch, and I got to understand it's probably been such a level up for you in terms of being effective through the ice. What are your thoughts on life without live scope and then life with live scope?
Yeah, so it's completely changed on how I fish, and it's completely so within the first, I bought live scope midsummer last year, and I got to use it on my boat before I used it on ice. And before I bought the unit, I absolutely loved ice fishing because I like to jig. I like to have a fish underneath me. I like to see what it's doing. I like to see that line on the graph, whether it's a hummingbird, or any sort of 2D unit. And I actually have one on my desk. This is Garmin's Castable. I'm about to release a video on this hopefully soon. They've had it for a couple of years, but it's just a little floating sonar that connects to your phone. You can plop that in the hole you've cut through the ice or cast it out with your rod. I love to ice fish because I just love to jig. And with jigging, you're only covering that same 60 feet of water because it's that fish has to see that jig. So having live scope, I mean, I'll drill a hole in the middle of, let's say, 5 people standing, buddies of mine, they're standing out in the lake, and I can pan around within 120 feet. If there's no fish there, like, I pack up and leave. Like, why are you leaving? Like, because there's no fish in the air. There's no sense of me standing here and wasting time. Like, I'm going to go find the fish and let's see what different type of structure they're on. And the other huge part of that is the amount of, within the first, I don't know, 2 months of using live scope, the amount of fish behavior and like fish lifestyle, if you want to call it that you learn in those first couple months using live scope. Even me using it full time, maybe it takes 4 months for somebody who's just a weekend warrior, is worth 10 years of being on the ice or 10 years of being on the water. It's absolutely insane. You can see that when you have that live scope panned 120 feet away and you see a snowmobile coming towards you and that fish disappears. I mean, absolutely runs away, swims away from you. And everybody's like, oh yeah, that snowmobiles don't scare fish, or jumping on the ice, or your auger doesn't scare fish. You have no proof until you see that on live scope. You see that fish actually swim away from you and actually book it. It's like, oh yeah, now that makes sense. Or you can tell that, fish are suspended in the water column, right? So most of the time, everybody's fishing lake trout on the bottom. Probably 15% of the time, they're not on the bottom. They're like right underneath the ice, just eating wherever there's might be bait. Having seen lake trout crash through a bait ball the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, like just seeing them dive and interact with fish, it's like, I need to make my bait look like that. I need to make my bait act like the bait fish in there. The jigging it up and down, bouncing on the bottom is great for when you have no sonar. So live scope has taught me a ton of what not to do and what to do and when to do it, and what the reaction of the fish is. Like, you would never know that. You learn some of that from a normal 2D sonar, but if you can, with live scope, you can tell which direction the fish is swimming in, whether it's towards you, away from you, if he's going up or if he's going down. You can see the size of the fish. I'll stop on a bunch of lake trout, even in the boat or ice fishing, I can tell that are 12 inches. I won't even bother. I'll just keep going. So hopefully that answers your question. I mean, it's worth the investment, and it's caught a lot of my, like, if I'm going crappie fishing where I try to get, like, let's say 4 hours of content or something like that, to pare it down to 2 hours or 20 minutes worth of content to release on YouTube. I can cut that trip in half with live scope. I can do it in 2 hours because I can pan the whole lake. I can find fish quicker. I can catch fish quicker. I can come back and film and edit and release the video all in one day. Where before it was just like, okay, I got to spend hours looking for fish.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's a win-win for us as the consumers who love to watch the videos. We get to see the live scope piece and you're able to pump up more content. And then for you, it's more efficient on the other
For
side of
sure.
things. Um, it was a really strange winter. I think we all understand that.
Yes,
I'm
for
sure you were
sure.
excited for getting into spring. So after this winter, what was like the first thing you did after Ice Out started?
So what did I do first thing? So first thing I did after ice out is I went to Sebago. And it wasn't even fully ice out. We weren't even sure if we were going to be able to launch the boat. So that was probably, I'm actually going back through my video content right now to make sure that was accurate. Just because Sebago is always open. Yeah, we launched, we went out of Sebago and we started, fishing right where we were bumping against ice that was breaking up, because Sebago did get a little ice. Some crazy son of a guns were out there on like 3 inches of ice and 180 feet of water. I've done that before. It's not the safest thing in the world to do, but we were, we probably could have been in the boat and ice fished the same day if we wanted to like scoot our butts across the ice. But we went out there, caught them in 180 feet, but that was the first thing. And I changed a little bit of my content this year than I did previous years. Um, I since I have the boat and since I have live scope, I really wanted to do some bigger trips instead of some more boat trips instead of land based trips where
Mhm.
I'm going to fish for like lake run fish. And the reason I don't do that is, one, there is a huge community of people out there that don't want to share any of the lake run fish spots, which are every stream that's comes out of or goes into Lake Winnipesaukee, where you can catch rainbows and salmon and lake trout and stuff like that. And I like to fish by myself and be alone. And the best way to do that is to go out in the boat and just go do it yourself instead of stand next to a bunch of people on shore that are all fighting for, dinner, which I don't really eat a lot of fish. So I changed some of my content this year because of that.
I want you to talk about your first on the fly experience this year.
The lake trout one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that was a long journey, and it says that I'm looking at that right now. So when I first moved up to Champlain, my cousin John had sent me a video of, there's a spot on Champlain where the lake trout spawn. And the reason they spawn there is, one, it's a great rocky area, and two, it's where Champlain stocks lake trout because the numbers were so bad for such a long time because of lamprey and pollution and whatever else the causes were. So they stock them there, so they always come back in that area. So they were showing electric shocking by Vermont Fish and Game. So this area and Lake Champlain never closes for any. You can always catch any species in there. You can't always keep the species. So you can go fly fish for them in the fall when they're up spawning, which some people say you shouldn't spawn for them. But anyways, I went there the first year I was up in Vermont, which was probably 2018 in the fall, and I hooked into a monster lake trout and lost it on the fly rod.
Ah,
And I was like super mad, and it's always bugged me. And I went on 3 more years. I tried to do that same trip, and it's in the fall when the weather is either fantastic or it's complete shit. And one of the times I went, there was like 8-foot waves, and I almost got ejected from my boat, and like the kill cord came loose and the engine stalled. I almost like flipped my boat. So I'm like, all right, this is not worth it in the fall. It's just too deadly. A lot of people do it from shore. So I've always wanted to catch a lake trout on the fly rod. And so this spring, there's lake trout are up shallow in small bays. They're getting where the water is warmer, and they like that because they've been used to 32-degree water for the most part. And that's where a lot of bait will come up to spawn and stuff in the spring. So with live scope, which I still feel is cheating in my own heart, I feel like it's cheating from a purist fly fisherman, where it's just like you should be blind casting into the middle of nowhere and expect something to bite. I could have, now that I've seen it on live scope. So we spent the day catching lots of fish using spinning gear and live scope, where you can cast, you're in less than 30 feet of water, casting 80 feet away, and you're plopping it right on the fish's nose and then racing it back. So I did the same thing with the fly rod, cast it out as far as I possibly could on the lake trout's nose, let the 10 weight 350 grain sinking line sink right in front of his face, And then I actually have the fly on my desk. It's just a clouser that I tied years ago that
Cool.
resembles a perch, and it's all beaked to hell because I caught a bunch of lake trout on it. And finally strip set into a nice 30-inch lake trout, and it was fantastic. So that was an eight-year journey to catch one trout on the fly rod. And I tried on Sebago and I tried on Champlain, and you can't do it on Winnipesaukee because their season closes in the fall, and in the spring, I don't know where they are in the spring. They're usually up on base, but not as shallow as on Champlain. But live scope made that possible. My cousin John made that possible, and Champlain, like the lake trout are all just massive and they just eat anything that moves. So it was easy. But that was one of my favorite videos this year.
What's the name of that video so people can check it out?
My biggest lake trout on the fly rod, my 8-year journey. That's the title.
It's a great video. People got to check it out. It was actually one of the first, I think, videos that I watched of yours when I started getting more into like your YouTube content. I definitely follow like a lot of your shorts and stuff on Instagram and whatnot. But it was just I thought a really cool one to start off my Bend-It journey. It's definitely a must watch.
Thank you. That was a great one.
You mentioned the boat. What's up with the boat? Everybody wants to know.
Yeah, how many swear words am I allowed to say per minute on a podcast, man?
You might have hit your limit. So
okay, yeah. I usually warn. I try not to swear. So I can't swear on. I can't swear on YouTube within the first 2 minutes. I can't say a certain number of words, otherwise the money ranking goes down. So I even if you bleep it, like say like the bleep noise. So I try not to swear, but personally in real life I swear a bunch. So what happened with the boat is so lake trout season kind of starts like the very beginning of July, end of June, where the water starts to warm. The thermocline of the lake actually switches. The warm water's on top, cold water's on the bottom. Lake trout don't like warm water, so they head down deep. Makes them very repeatable and very easy to find on electronics. So I just bought a very expensive sonar, a $2,500 transducer for live scope so I can actually see deeper. I went out of Alton. I filmed a great video where I caught a bunch of fish, edited it down. Video did okay, or not the best actually, but I think it'll take a while to get found just because of the way the content was. I had to go pick up my son in daycare at Bedford, so I pick him up in Bedford, and I have 2 ways to go home. 2 ways, 2 common ways to go home. I can take the highway, and I can go the back roads, and I like going the back roads just because merging on the highway with the boat and my son is just a nightmare because he's saying, Daddy, you need a snack or something. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to go this way, buddies. He's like, no, I want to go that way today. I'm like, well, Daddy's going this way because I have the boat. I should have listened to my son. So I'm going through stop and go traffic in Goffstown on 114 and 114A. It's just a stop and go intersection where it's just a light and it's annoying. And if you get it right at 5 o'clock, there's a ton of traffic. 5-10 minutes of traffic sometimes, and I'm literally just stop and go, and I feel a bump from behind me towing the boat, and I just close my eyes and I look back in the rearview mirror, and there's no flipping motor on the back of my boat. Mother. So there's, and my son's in the back, like he knows the F word. He's 3. I literally pull. I don't see the motor, which is not a good sign. I'm like, this is actually, go back a few steps. When I launched in Alton, my boat wouldn't start. And I spent 10 minutes like trying to dump fuel in the carburetor, trying to do all this stuff. It would turn over, but wouldn't fire. And apparently when I was coming back at 2 a.m. from striper fishing on Monday, I never put it back in neutral. And so it has a default, it won't start. So that was strike 1 for the day. I believe in the strike 3 thing. Like strike 1 for the day was boat wouldn't start. Strike 2 was my son saying, oh, you should go this way, Daddy. And then strike 3 was I get hit by a car. So a Chevy Impala, one of the older ones, had rear-ended me at like maybe 5-10 miles an hour. Some kid, some guy younger than me, hits me, and I'm like, all right, so I just got hit. I don't want to block traffic because I'm going to piss everybody else off behind me. So I roll down my window, look back, make sure everything's fine, and then I just, drive and I have to drag my 50 horsepower Evinrude, which they don't make anymore because Evinrude's out of business, drag it across the tar onto the side of the road, put it in park, put my hazards on, and get out. And I'm like, can you go get the stuff out of the road so we don't cause another accident? So my I don't know, you know what a transom saver is, but it's basically a stick on the back of the boat that holds the motor up so it prevents your transom from getting banged up or dented and ripped off. So he had snapped the motor completely off. The motor mount, the clamp that goes onto the back of the boat, completely snapped off. And I was dragging it by the power cables and the gas line. So luckily no sparks or gas things spurted everywhere somehow. So I picked up the stuff off the road, threw it in my boat, and then I had to drive off the road even more because I didn't want to get hit by somebody because my son was in the car. So I took a couple more deep breaths. I said, "You're all right. I'm all right." No really words were exchanged. I'm like, "I'm calling the police. They'll be here in a minute." The police station's literally 5,000 feet away. Like it's literally quarter mile, not even. So they come, asked us what happened, to the report, blah, blah, blah. So I had 3 or 4 firefighters, after I had to clip some cables off my motor, lift the motor up off the ground into the back of my boat. And I dragged it home. So the transom was dented just a little bit because the transom saver took most of the hit, which is, like I said, that big piece of steel. And then it basically, the motor is here. What he did is his car went underneath the motor and popped it up, and then it fell down. So the boat didn't take the brunt of it. The motor mounted and the transom saver did. So everybody had been worried about the transom on my boat. So that fell off. And then within the same day, I drove it over to a boat dealer to get a quote because I knew that was going to be my next step. I called my insurance. They said, you got to call their insurance. They'd already submitted a claim. And then like 3 days goes by and nothing. 5 days goes by and nothing. So I start calling and calling and calling. Every time I talk to somebody, it's somebody different. Everybody's like, "So what is this?" I'm like, "It's a boat. Like, I just need a new motor for the boat. I'm pretty sure." I'm like, "Send your people over. Do what you got to do." I get a quote for a brand new motor, a Tohatsu motor, because they don't make Evinrude anymore, and I didn't want to deal with Mercury at the time. So I get a quote for that, and after 15 phone calls and probably 17 days of a boat, they finally said, "You know what? Let's make you go away. I'm going to transfer money into your account for a full new motor and another $1,000 for like other things that got dented and scratched on the boat." I'm like, "Great. That's fantastic." Give a deposit for the motor for the boat, the brand new motor. The guy's like, "Oh, that was last Wednesday, not this Wednesday." Yeah, last Wednesday. Actually, well, you know what? Not last Wednesday, the June 28th. Gave him the money, took the money on Friday. And then there was the holiday week. And so I called him like a couple times last week. He never called me back. This is the boat dealer, by the way. I'm not going to name him until everything's settled because I'll freaking lose my mind. And I walk in there yesterday because he's not answering my phone calls. He's like, "I'm here because you're not answering my phone calls." He's like, "Who are you?" And I almost lost it, man. I almost lost it. I'm like, "Yeah, I just gave you $5,000 last week for a deposit for a motor." He's like, "Oh yeah. I put that. That should be let me call them. I'll get back to you. I'll call back." And he's like, "Oh yeah, it won't be shipping until tomorrow, which is this Wednesday, the 12th. So I'll probably be without a boat for a month on the second busiest part of my season, if it even comes in."
I got a feeling the tail end of your season is going to be a great one. It's going to be
Thank
worth
you.
the
I
wait.
appreciate that.
You had a good trip up to Pittsburgh though, and I'm glad the boat thing is getting settled. I'm sorry you went through that, but I know
It's
the whole
brutal.
Bennett community is thinking of you and rooting for you with that. You went to Pittsburgh for sure.
Yes.
So, and by the way, sorry to get you wound up about that. I was just hoping
I'm getting angry just thinking about it. I was trying not to think about it, but that's all right. I knew it was gonna come up. So it's an aggravating thing. It feels like I can't catch a break sometimes. And last year, all my camera gear got stolen right in my driveway. So it's just like every year something goes bad. Like I don't know. It makes you want to quit sometimes.
Well, we're all glad you did not, and that you are not. How was your trip to Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh trip was fish wise was pretty good. It's the same trip we do every year with a group of guys. It's my dad's friends, and then a couple of one of my friends or a couple of my friends try to come up, and it's usually a good time. We stay at Partridge Cabins, which are family friends of ours who's been going up there for the last 12 or 13 years, something like that. Caught a bunch of fish, went up the day early and caught a bunch of fish the next day. And unfortunately, my brother was sick or getting sick. My dad was sick. One of our other crew members or guys that was with us was just getting over COVID. So everybody was like kind of in a funk. And my buddy, my friend that came up a day later than he normally does. So it was just like a short trip and then it was over. But we caught a ton of fish, or at least I did. I mean, it was 25 fish a day at least. So good trip for me.
Yeah, those shorts are fun to watch. A lot of nice brookies that you guys pulled in.
Yeah.
And it looks like you were up there during a few hatches. What was going on hatch wise?
Yeah. So I don't pay attention to hatches like most people do. And there's a big reason for that. I don't care. I really don't. So everybody's like, oh, the Hendrickson hatch or the Mayfly hatch. I'm like, these fish. So we go in the first week of June, the first weekend in June. These fish are literally stocked 2 weeks before that. They were literally eating cat food. Like Pittsburgh is severely stocked. The town of Pittsburgh just itself gets 50,000 fish alone.
Wow.
Like that's one of the reasons everybody goes up there. It is a fly fisher's heaven. And there's other places you don't have to fly fish. So I don't pay attention to the hatch because these are stock fish. There is places that I do pay attention to hatches that are like tailwaters that are very specific. I try not to fish those because they're kind of a pain in the butt, like the Swift River in Massachusetts that everybody knows about. I've seen hatches there, but there were stoneflies, mayflies, and caddis hatches all at the same time. It was just a really weird time. We had like really warm weather, and then we had a really cold day where it was like 39 degrees. And if you just hit, like, depending on the type of water, you just slap a big dry fly on the water and they'll hit it. For the most part, I use one fly and one fly only. And it's a white woolly bugger. It's just a generic smelt looking pattern. I tell people, like, there's one hatch that always happens in Pittsburgh all year long, and it's bait fish. Like trout will, if you listen to the trout greats like Rosenbauer or Tom Rosenbauer, it's like trout will go after the biggest piece of food that they can find without expelling the most amount of energy. So I fish with basically look up a white woolly bugger or any sort of woolly bugger. It's just a generic bait pattern. It's like the Senko of the fly fishing world. Some people say, oh, don't use that. I'm like, it's extremely deadly. If you know how to use it, you know how to drift it, you know how to dredge it to the bottom. If I didn't lose the fish, I probably would have caught 17 fish on the same fly.
Wow.
And I can see it. The fish can see it. I'm not tying on a size 22 fly or a size 20 or even 18. Like there's no point. I do tie with a 10, I think, with some of their fish, but and there was 5 other spots in Pittsburgh that I didn't even release a video for. I didn't even film because I just go up there to have fun for the most part. There's a very popular spot. I went 15 casts. I caught 10 fish. And like the guy next to me is like, what the hell are you using? Like, I'm using it's called a Y2K fly. It's like a chartreuse egg with a little pink bead on it. And you just throw it in front of these fish's face and they literally cannot resist it. It's like cheating. Like I caught my 10 fish and I walked out and I gave the next spot. I gave the fly to somebody else and then I went fish somewhere else.
Nice.
So there's a couple places in Pittsburgh that I don't film at just because I like those spots. And I don't even disclose where I go because they're just, you don't see anybody there. They're kind of a long hike in. I leave the easy spots for everybody else. And talking about like the fly fishing community, if you look at any of my Pittsburgh fly fishing videos, the only mean comments I get are on those videos. Don't know why.
Like critical or
critical. They're like, oh, the fish handling, you should use forceps and you should bend over your barb and you should hold them and caress them, and so they release gently into the water. And it's just old grungy freaking white dudes that are grumpy and watching YouTube videos and they're mad that they're not in Pittsburgh right now. And I'm fine with saying that. And like we actually got into like not an altercation, but like a stuff with somebody last year. And I'm not going to talk about that because I'm going to get more of an angry about it. But yeah, Pittsburgh's a great place. I'm actually going back in the next 3 weeks or so, but I'm bringing my boat and I'm going to fish 2 out of the 4 lakes up there, hopefully, for lake trout.
Nice. Yeah, I went to the first Connecticut for some lake trout a few years ago. I had a great time there.
Yeah, that's very loaded with lake trout.
yeah. We usually go to Belgrade every year for like a guy's trip, similar to what you're doing, but same kind of core group of guys. And we just switched up one year, went to fish the Connecticut's, and
Nice.
if we were able to hit lake fish, I think anybody can. So yeah, it's fun up there.
Yeah.
So what do you have on the list for things for the remainder of the season?
So tomorrow, maybe even tonight, don't know yet. I'm going to Champlain with my cousin's boat, my cousin John. So he's got a channel called Woods and Weeds Outdoors. So he does a little YouTube stuff, but he's got a full-time job. So and a newborn, so he's not doing a ton. But we're going lake trout jigging tomorrow with a new kit that I'm going to show you later here in a minute. A new bait that I'm not new bait, but like a kit that I'm selling that I'm going to be releasing in the next video. So I'm doing that. I do have a bunch of lake trout videos planned in the future. I also have a Lake Superior trip planned that I have to call a guide about in the next week or so, and that's coming up quickly. So I got to figure out how to fly out there and get a hotel and all that jazz, where they catch religiously 40-inch, 20-pound lake trout, which I'm super pumped. It's like a huge bucket list trip for me.
Yes. All right. Good times.
Yeah, and he's a Garmin live scope aficionado, so he's got a dual live scope XR 12-inch screens on his boat, or 10-inch, I think. So I'm excited to use. I have the same tech. Excited to use that and catch monster fish because it's super sweet. All the fish he's been posting is driving me nuts. So can't wait to go out there. But I plan on just doing a lot of lake trout for the rest of the year. That's my big revenue source. Is lake trout, and then making the baits for that. I do love striper fishing, and my new motor has to be broken in, so I can't even take it to the ocean until I get done with that, because I can't go over like a certain number of RPMs, and I don't want to be stuck in current and stuff like that with a motor I can't go full speed at. So until that's broken in, I can't even go striper fishing. But I did go a couple times earlier this year and did okay. Just it's tough to film at night, or even with stripers during the day and stuff like that. And those videos do okay. Surprisingly, they don't do fantastic.
Got it. So
but yeah, that's what I got planned for the year. Kind of an open book for the most part because I have no boat.
Yeah, man. Sorry to bring it up.
It's a sore spot if you can't tell.
It's gonna make everyone so happy to see you back on it, though. I know that's for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's get into what you were just talking about, more like your tackle line. Talk about how that came to be and some of the people who gave you some words of wisdom on how to like finagle some baits that you're already using to be more honed into New England, and what you got right now in your shop.
Yeah, so we talked about it last time briefly when we were, people walking past this. So the first, when I moved to New Hampshire, I had never fished Winnipesaukee. So I grew up in New Hampshire until I was 18, and then went off to college in Concord, and I fished at a couple of trout ponds when I was younger, but never really hardcore fished. Got really into striper fishing in Connecticut, and then moved to Vermont, where I never lake trout fished, just bass fished. And then I moved to New Hampshire, where I kind of like stopped bass fishing because it's either I bass fish and I do tournaments, or I don't bass fish at all. So I decided not to do bass fishing, because catching a bunch of bass is fun, but tournament fishing is wicked fun, to me at least. And I like being that competitive. I was fairly good at it when I was doing it back in the day. So I started ice fishing Winnipesaukee because I didn't have a boat or anything like that. I just had a canoe, and I got skunked once, and then I got skunked again twice, and then I got skunked again a third time. And really, no one was really willing to share any information. I didn't have any local resources because I just moved back, and I didn't know anybody that really fished it, besides what I was seeing on Facebook. And there's one guy who's he's passed away now, Will Lazar, and he's a great guy in the fishing community. And he's one of those guys you meet once and he would just hug you, and he's just like an overall like gentle, nice guy. And he was the only one that would share information on Facebook, and he would get blasted for it. He's like, oh, you're sharing all the secrets and you're sharing all the spots. And he would post his exact track on Navionics, like where he walked to, what bait he was using, what time of day he went. He was just an older guy who was retired, that was just willing to share. And so he was using little tiny baits, and I got one right here on my desk that matched a smelt. And so I eventually went to Bass Pro and I bought some tungsten jigs that like he was using and a little white fluke. And I actually started catching fish because 90% of the forage in Lake Winnipesaukee is like this big. Like it's tiny, tiny. And those are rainbow smelt. Now they do get big. They do get up to like 8, 9, 10 inches. It's rare. They do find them. It depends on the year and stuff like that. And actually, New Hampshire Fish and Game actually surveys the amount of smelt every year to know how many salmon to put in the lake every year. So they use the same technology I have on a boat, and they go measure all these bait balls around the lake, and then they base that on the stocking of how many salmon they're going to put in. So he was using like wicked tiny baits, and all the stuff that I was using was these giant one ounce bucktails that are like 5 inches long, that are massive, because that's what I was seeing on YouTube. It's like these guys in Canada that are catching 40-inch lake trout, because their fish, their bait is literally this big. It's like the size of a baseball. I mean, like a football. They're just bigger fish. And they have a lot more pressure. Like every time they get out of a fish comes in, it bites. Like that does not happen here in New Hampshire. We have finicky asshole fish.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah.
For a lack of a better term. So once I realized what he was using, I started, buying the tungsten jigs myself. I'm just reselling them. And then I started buying the plastics from Dick's Sporting Goods, and then I couldn't find them for a while. And then I'm like, you know what? My cousin John, who used to make baits, I'm like, let me ask him, how do I get into this? So you got to buy Plastisol, which is just like a 2-part epoxy stuff. It's liquid. You got to heat it in a microwave to turn it from liquid to a plastic or a rubbery state. And this is revision 2. Yeah, 2 of the bait. So this is a 2-inch pearl white paddle shad.
Hold your hand behind it just for a few seconds.
Yeah, the glares.
Yeah, perfect. Got you. Yep, looks good.
And then it has a 7mm tungsten jig. So about 90%. Well, I don't know what the split is in the lake. So we call these pin smelt. So they're on that. I've seen lake trout throw up bait that's literally an inch long. And I've actually fished with bait on Winnipesaukee, where I'll actually take this 2-inch bait that we're seeing right now, and I'll cut it in half. That's how finicky these little freaking lake trout will get. And I'll actually make it this long. And that's the only thing these freaking lake trout will eat, is something this long. And I've had 25.5-inch and 27-inch and 30-inch or 28.5-inch lake trout eat that in New Hampshire. That size, 1-inch bait, because that's all they eat until they get to a certain size where they're going to eat perch, or they're going to eat burbot or white perch, or bigger crawfish and stuff like that, when there's not tons of smelt. But that's 90% of their forage, right? And it's everywhere especially during the wintertime, where they can go in the water column. So I started making it for myself, and then I'm like, you know what? People are asking me this. My buddy was asking me, my buddy Ryan, that you see in a lot of my videos, was like, oh, can I get some of those jigs? I'm like, all right, I'll buy them in bulk and I'll start selling them. So I started selling them on Facebook and Instagram, and then I had a Google Excel sheet to do it with, an order form, and then I accepted Venmo and PayPal before they started taking the taxes out. And then I finally talked to my old boss at my old company, who runs a couple of small companies where he sells coffee and laser cut stuff, and I found a website to host my baits online, and learned how to do all of it. It's not really design, it's not really pretty, but it's functional. I don't have a lot of time to spend on it, but it does all the money stuff for me. It accepts PayPal and does all that kind of stuff, and credit cards take $1 off of every order, or whatever the percentage is. Kind of annoying, but you just ignore it. And that's how I got into it. So that's it for New Hampshire baits. So the 7mm tungsten, and then the 2-inch paddle tail. So I make it in white, super glow, which is clear. It glows green. And then I make it in chartreuse. And so I sell these ones, and then I sell a pin smelt one that just has a skinnier profile that's smooth, and they're all swim bait style ones. And the super glow ones, there was not a lot of baits that glow on the market. One, I don't really know why. And it's a little more, the material is more expensive. The glow powder is expensive. And getting it to be consistent is expensive. And they actually change color over time. Like they'll actually start to yellow, but the fish don't really seem to care. Maybe that's why. But there's a couple companies out there that make them, but not in this size, not in this small 2-inch stuff. So that's what I started doing. So I sell a Winnie kit, which I don't have in front of me. I don't, but I have the only one I got. It's in my boat, and my boat's at the boat shop still for the last month. Which
That
has
damn
everything
boat,
in it.
It just keeps coming up. The poor boat.
Damn boat, man. I had to go over there the other day and get a rod out of it because I forgot to take one of the rods out for tomorrow. So that's my biggest seller is the Winnie kit, or Winnipesaukee kit. It's got everything that you need for it in there to fish Winnipesaukee in any smelt lake along New England. So I worked well in Vermont. It's worked well in Maine. I've caught big brook trout on it. I've caught rainbows on it, brown trout on it. Basically, with this little tiny jig, we're matching the hatch, which is smelt.
And I love that it's honed in for New England. I feel like with a lot of bass lures too, it's the same thing. A lot of bass stuff is like made for down south or for like fishing in Okeechobee for these absolute Goliaths. But then you come up here, you come up here and probably like half the time it hits the water, those type of baits just scares the fish away.
Exactly. Like we don't have 7-inch shad like they do down there, like huge shad fish. We don't have any of that in any lake here in New Hampshire. We have, our biggest thing is like redfin shiners, right?
Mm-hmm.
So shad, or what's the other big bait that they have down there? But shad's the main one. I mean, the bass will eat it on the thing, but if they're being very finicky, or they're pressured, and I've caught lots of bass on these things too. I've done very well on those with bass.
Anything else in the Bend It catalog people should take a look out for?
Yeah, so something I haven't released yet. I think I'm gonna set a price on it today. I hope I got it figured out. Is the and I literally just put this together today and put the label on it today, is the big bait kit.
Yeah, buddy. Talk us through it.
So this is gonna be $40. I think. Hopefully they won't hold me to that price. So it's a 4.75-inch paddle tail. Now, the other bait that New England has is alewives, alewives is the correct term. And they have them in Sebago, and they have them on Champlain. There's one lake in New Hampshire that has them, which I won't disclose. I might have disclosed it last time we talked, but that fish gets a lot bigger, and it gets up to 6 or 7 or 8 inches. So this is a big swim bait, and we're matching that with a lead-free glow in the dark, either white or chartreuse. You probably can't see that there. White or chartreuse. Yeah. 5/0 mustad heavy duty hook. So that'll pair onto there. And this bait is symmetrical, or the same size all the way back here. So if you're getting light strikes or short strikes, you can just cut that bait and make it short. And then the really big seller is the this is my kit, so there's some defective ones in there, but there shouldn't be. Is the 6-inch glow in the dark grub tail. So that thing will flutter as it's getting ripped away from the fish, and that glows like crazy. Obviously,
I think it's a Dugan.
Yeah, so they used to call them twister tails, or I just call it a grub tail.
Yeah.
But that is clear. So with glow in the dark baits, you want it, and so this is white pearl and glow, and for this one it's just glow. So you want that glow to be as bright as possible. So you don't want any sort of colorant or anything around it. When I realized with live scope, if you drop that down there and it's glowing bright, like I'll use a UV light to glow it, or I'll just use the sun. I've seen fish come from 30 feet away in 100 feet of water and just slam it.
Wow.
Like that's mine, and just like absolutely book. You can't even reel away from them fast enough.
And Josh, these are your custom pours?
Yep, these are my
custom molds, custom pours.
Yeah, the molds aren't custom. They're stock, but the powder, the glow stuff I'm using is, it's all off the shelf. But it took me a long time to one, get the right mold to match, get the right colors to match, get the right pearl powder to match, because I've had to switch companies like 4 or 5 times because they had sourcing issues during COVID and stuff like that, over the last couple of years. So they kept changing it on me, and so I've had to change things based on that. And then I had to have these custom jigs made because 90% of the jigs that you find that are in the 3/4 to 1 ounce range are lead, and you're only allowed to use painted stuff in Maine, and then Vermont has its own rules. So I said, you know what, screw it. I'll pay a little bit more and I'll just go lead free. There's a guy out of Massachusetts that makes them for me. Lead free Bass Jigs is the name of the company. Great guy, and so he's making for me, powder coating them and everything. But I had to do, make sure everything glows because it's dark when you're fishing down on 100 feet. So tomorrow I'm going to be fishing Champlain anywhere between 90 and 120, and it's pitch dark down there.
So you just dropping them straight down, or you casting them?
Dropping them straight down. There's a couple people out there that will pitch out and jig it back. There's really no reason for that. That adds a lot of sag to your line unless you're using a really, really heavy lure, and that will make you biff a couple hook sets, and it's not necessary, that I found, at least.
Got it. Very cool. And I saw you also had some flies on there for sale, some striper flies.
I do. I have one striper fly on there because it was highly requested from a couple of videos. So in the last 3 or 4 years, I go for schoolies first thing in the spring. I use one fly and one fly only. It's just a white EP fiber bait fish, just generic pattern that I tied. And I put it up there, and I put a bunch of orders. I sold a bunch before I put it on the website, and I haven't got any orders since because I haven't been out. Like, the schoolie season was very short. It was like schoolies and then big fish arrived, because it doesn't appear to be a lot of smaller fish this year, which is good and bad if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
But that's on there. And then I had stickers. I'm going to put stickers on the website at some point. I had beanies that I put on in the wintertime, and I had hoodies on there for a little while, and I was custom making them myself with like a vinyl print and stuff like that. And it's such a pain in the ass, I took it down. Until I get like a lot of requests for it and I can have a shop do it for me where I'm not losing money, then I'll do it. But the bait business is doing well. It'll do better once I start releasing some more lake trout videos.
Awesome. So just so everyone knows, the site for Josh's shop is www.benditfishing.company.site. You can find everything he just talked about there, and the soon to be released big bait box.
Yes, the big bait box will be released probably in the next week or so. I'm going to do I think a pre-sale on it just to get some feelers out there for videos, because like I said, like lake trout season started, lake trout jigging season started like July 1st, basically, when the water starts to get warm enough. We've had a funky year because of all this flipping rain. I'm actually almost didn't go to Champlain as of earlier today because they shut down 89 because of all those floods in Vermont. And now it's open back up again. I will check it again at 3:00 in the morning before I leave because I have to be there by 6. So I am going. The lake temp will be probably cold and it'll probably be really dirty. So we'll see how the fishing goes. But yeah, that's the website. And go check it out. And I just split the website into 2 different categories, big baits and small baits, because people were ordering the wrong thing. They were ordering like the 2-inch baits and then the big jigs. And I've sold stuff all the way from I've sold stuff to Florida. Don't know why. People just saw in the video and are probably going to use it for something else, I'm guessing. There's definitely no lake trout down there. I've sold stuff to Alaska. I had an order that was supposed to go to Sweden that got completely misplaced and ended up in Brazil. So I had to refund the guy recently. That was super fun. So if you ever want to deal with international shipping people, just don't even bother. And then I went back to reship the order, and they said, oh yeah, the shipper could pay up to $500 in taxes and fees. I'm like, well, he's definitely not going to buy this because it was like $100 worth of stuff. So I ended up refunding the guy, and I'm like, sorry, I can't ship overseas. I don't know how to do that yet. So what a nightmare that was. That was like another month of my time fighting back and forth with the post office.
I love that you just keep fighting through all the adversity though, man.
Yeah, I got no choice. I gotta make a run of this. I'm trying. word of advice from people. So a lot of people quit their day jobs and do YouTube full time when they're at like 80,000 subscribers, because that's when the ad revenues, there's enough ad revenue and there's enough need for sponsored content to make a living. I'm not even close to that. I'm at 14,500 right now on the YouTube platform, which is the only one that pays me right now. TikTok was paying, but it's like pennies for a little while. They've changed some of their structure recently. I left really early, and that was, a big love from my wife, who's the best and the supporter that's allowing me to get up at 3 a.m. and I'm keeping my 3-year-old, putting him to bed right now, hopefully, keeping him quiet while I do a podcast. So she's the best. I'm supposed to say that legally, and I love her. I love her the most. And she's doing a lot of the funding. The Bates do a lot of the funding. I do some sponsored content, and a lot of the sponsors that I've talked to recently they're taking a hit too, just economy wise. People aren't just out there spending willy-nilly money on stuff. So I had one of my sponsors, Postfly, who's owned by one of the biggest people out there around, which is Mystery Tackle Box, that company, saying like, hey, we have a severe marketing cut. We can't do any sponsored content until further notice. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll figure something else to do. So that's the other reason I am releasing a lot of fly fishing content.
Got it.
I gotta pay the bills with it.
Sure. Yeah, it's happening to a lot of expos and stuff too, who really rely on sponsorship, and some people who have been sponsors for years this year,
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I feel like it's happening throughout the outdoor industry for sure.
Yeah, it's not a good sign, and usually hobbies take the first hit on any sort of downturn. I was young when it was 2008. I'm sure you were too, so I don't remember like really what happening, but I knew it wasn't good. Hopefully that stuff doesn't happen again. And the outdoor industry doesn't get a ton of funding from YouTube anyways. Like, they'd rather see one of the highest paid channels out there are like money channels, the money advice channels, and like people that do makeup.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not out there killing and cooking fish. Hunting channels and stuff get even worse because they're guns and all that kind of stuff their money's a lot lower. It's just how it works.
Yeah, for sure.
What else you got?
Any other advice for content creators, whether it be someone who's thinking about getting started or people early on in the content creation?
Yeah, so one of the suggestions that I was just giving out to someone recently is I had about actually 3 people in the last month or so. I was like, hey, I want to start a YouTube channel. We've been, me and my buddy have been filming out, using our GoPro. Is one, learn how to use, if you don't have a GoPro, use your phone. Clean out all the extra garbage on your phone. Just use a camera on your phone. They're fantastic. Get a chest camera, mount your cell phone to you, make it easy, plug it in with a power supply. If you don't know how to do that, or you don't want to do that, if you have a GoPro, learn how to run a GoPro off a battery pack, which is just one of those Mophie power supplies, and learn how to use loop mode on your GoPro. So if you don't know what that is, which your GoPro has as 2 settings, is 5 minutes and 20 minutes. What that does is let's say this is an hour time frame, and you have that set to a 5-minute cycle. It actually records continuously for 5 minutes. And so if you catch a fish, you hit the end record button and it saves 5 minutes of that footage. What I do stupidly in a lot of my videos, not all of them, I have that GoPro never stops. It records for 8 hours straight, and which means I have 8 hours of footage to go through, which takes me hours to edit. So if you go to loop mode and you catch 3 fish, that could be 15 minutes worth of stuff to edit instead of 8 hours worth of stuff to edit. So I didn't know that. I was always super nervous about losing footage because I was doing it. So that'll save you a bunch of time. Get a decent laptop or a computer. I'm running on a very fast computer because I release everything in 4K. Just spend the money. I've smoked 3 laptops editing. Like, it's just so much energy and so much power and like computing power. If you want to get into a full time, if you don't want to do any of that, I would literally just say film with your phone. Like a year ago or 2 years ago, like pandemic, I would have said, don't even bother getting on YouTube before Shorts was released. I would have said, go into TikTok full time. Like, go into content, do jokes, drop water balloons on your wife or something like that. Do pranks, do something that's clickbait worthy, right? Do something that like that's like that, or do something you love. Like there's channels that are fully on crocheting or gardening or whatever. If you think you got something to say and you want to share it with people, then film it on your phone and release it on YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram Reels. The organicness of Instagram Reels is slowly going down, I feel like. Same with YouTube Shorts. Same with TikTok. TikTok has changed their algorithm quite a bit. And like all of this stuff is ever changing. It's a nightmare for creators like me. I have to keep track of it. And everything that I did last year that worked is not working this year. Like I'm like, oh, I'm gonna release like literally almost the identical videos, same thumbnail, and tanked. It's like, really? Like this worked 365 days ago, like to the day. It's just the content needs to change. And by the time you figure it out, they change it again, or the audience changes. So that would be what I say. And then don't listen to any of the comments. Like people say mean things all the time. It's not worth it. And don't fill your head with the positive comments either, because that'll drive you nuts too. Like just look at the comment. If it bothers you, delete it. Like don't respond to it. Like I don't get a lot of mean comments. Most of the comments I've gotten that are mean, Facebook's the meanest out there. Facebook Reels are, I think they call them Reels, are pretty organic. They grow pretty fast now too. But I would just do short content, and you can make money doing that. You can get sponsored deals doing that. It is a lot easier than releasing a very polished 20-minute video or even a 10-minute video. I'm just, the amount you can make more consistent money on long form content, but you got to get at that ratio on YouTube where it's 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watched hours in order to make money. So it's a long journey to get there, or you got to be some crazy, bubbly, entertaining person, and I'm not that guy. So I have to do something else like fishing or how-to videos. So that's my advice. Hopefully people. That's what I told people literally last week. Do short content. Make short videos, because people are just scrolling while they're pooping on the toilet.
It's true, man. It's true. On the business side of things, what's it mean to you to be a small business owner in New England and now releasing these custom products for the region?
It's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. It means a lot to me because like I'll get pictures of people, like I literally caught my first lake trout on your jigs and baits. Or my son, who I've taken ice fishing 20 times at this lake, and I always catch fish, and he doesn't. And this is a lake not too far from here. He finally caught his first lake trout, and he's like 7 or something like that. Like that melts my heart. Like that's fantastic. So that's part of the small business is great. And I'm not like a free stater or anything like that, for lack of a better term, but the amount of paperwork and stuff that you have to do to run a business in the United States, I know probably being like Bulgaria and stuff where you can't even own a business, I'm sure that's way worse. But like to set up to do all your taxes, to you have to buy QuickBooks every month to make sure everything's kept up, to make sure you set up an LLC, to make sure all the money's going to the proper spot, to make sure everybody gets their piece of, you spend $50 on my website, PayPal takes a cut, and then the credit card takes a cut, and then you got to do taxes on the end. Like all that stuff drives me insane. Like I understand why business is like, just give me cash, and that's like it's like $100 off. Like I completely understand that. Like I really want to go back to cash because it's kind of demeaning. It's kind of like sad that all of that stuff goes away when you go back to a small business. And like I lost that order that went to Sweden because the post office wasn't willing to help me. Like I went down there, I'm like, I want insurance on this, and then there was lost. Like, well, there's no insurance on this type of shipping. I'm like, really? Like I asked for your insurance. Like everything else has insurance. The mail stuff down the street has insurance on the same thing. Like post office drives me nuts too. But it means a lot. Like I've always wanted to run my own company. And by the time I got there, which was last year, and selling my own products, like I didn't even realize it until people started like sending me pictures of like, I just caught fish on your bait, where I've gone out for lake trout 10 times and never caught anything. Like that means a lot. That brings a tear, like gives you the happy tears, for lack of a better term. So that hopefully that answers your question. But it's really cool to see that out there, because a lot of this stuff is I just post out into oblivion, and a couple of people comment, and I don't know if there's any feedback at all. I don't get feedback until I meet someone on the street. It's like, oh yeah, I love your content. I'm like, oh, thank you. I'm like, you should say that when you're in the comments, please. It's really weird. Like even at the show, like, oh, I love your content. I love this and blah 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 blah. I'm like, well, comment on the video because that helps me out. Like that helps the algorithm out. But I know everybody's busy. Everybody just wants to watch the content or get the information and then go out and fish or whatever, which is, the issue about doing the summertime. So hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, for sure, man. And then some. And it almost seems as though with your baits now, your ice fishing stuff specifically, it's almost like carrying out that gentleman's legacy who helped you out
Oh, for sure.
which I think it makes it even more special.
Yeah. And I met him a couple times on the ice. I went and filmed 2 of the New Hampshire fishing get-togethers with him, and he was just a fantastic guy. And if he didn't share that, I don't know if I would have caught fish. Maybe eventually I would have bugged somebody or actually paid a guide to go out. And just having the right bait just works. And there's not a lot of stuff out there for lake trout. And I'm like, this is my niche inside of a niche, or niche inside of a niche, if you want to call it that. A lot of people use tubes and stuff like that. I hate them because they spin up and they don't work as well. I know they do work. A lot of people use those. So I just like the swim baits and the grub tails, and I'll probably make tubes at some point. But yeah, carrying on his legacy, and I love teaching. My old job, which I still do on the side, is teaching, and I'm actually super comfortable. Like you put me in front of an audience of like 20 people on how to jig for lake trout, I guarantee everybody will be catching lake trout by the end of the day. And a lot of people ask me, it's like, why don't you become a guide? I'm like, well, because guys don't get to fish. Like
it's true.
That's the problem. Like you see a couple guys like, oh yeah, I got to go out fishing, fishing today for the first time in a while, and I'm like, well, that's great. Like I get to go fishing whenever I want and get, I don't make as much money as a guide. I can make more and more money if I get bigger, but yeah, carrying on that guy's legacy. Is a great guy. He did pass away last year, I think, a year and a half ago or something like that.
All right, Josh, thank you so much for being on. Hit us with your handles on social.
Yeah, so YouTube is Bend It Fishing, 3 words. Instagram is bend_it_fishing. TikTok is Bend It Fishing. I'm on Instagram Reels under Bend It Fishing. You can just not Instagram Reels, but the new Threads, which is kind of like the Twitter ripoff. What else am I on? I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll just search Bend It Fishing or go to my YouTube channel. My Instagram is my main, like the most up-to-date stuff, where I'll share stories and stuff like that, because YouTube's shutting off stories for some reason because people don't use them. Actually, that's my most live content. Or on my Facebook page under Bend It Fishing, which is my business Facebook page, which you can contact me. I get messages and questions all the time about where to fish, how to fish. You can just ask me questions whenever you want.
Right on, man. All right, people, that's Josh Treadwell from Bend It Fishing. Give him a follow using those handles there, and comment. And make sure the comments are kind of nice. At least
kind of nice. Yeah, just any comment, like what you ate for lunch that day. I don't care. Like comments, any sort of interaction with the channel. And summer's a slow time for me. And a lot of channels, people just like kind of are out adventuring and doing their own stuff and camping, doing family stuff. So summer's slow, so I slow down. I'm only releasing like 1 video a week right now, which is back to what I was doing before. But I got lots of other business like the more I put into the YouTube channel, the more business I get. So it's I have to try to balance both of them. So trying to do that, it's difficult.
All right, Josh. Well, hopefully next time we all see you, you're in the boat, and
hope so too.
Getting tight on maybe a striper or something. You never know.
Yeah.
But yeah, people, give Josh a follow. And Josh, thank you again for coming on. It means a lot.
You're very welcome. Nice talking to you.